You woke up this morning, but what if the world had ended last night and no one noticed? What if 7 mysterious sounds echoed through the sky, transforming everything silently, like invisible rain touching the earth? What if the apocalypse wasn't fire and destruction, but something completely different? What if the 7 trumpets of the apocalypse sounded today, but instead of bringing destruction, they brought the softest revolution the world had ever known? Picture this. You wake up on an ordinary Tuesday morning, sunlight filtering through your bedroom curtains. Like liquid honey, the coffee maker hums its familiar tune. Birds chirp outside your window. Everything feels perfectly normal. But something has shifted in the fabric of reality, so subtle that most people don't notice it at first. The first trumpet had sounded at 3:17 a.m. while the world slept, not with the thunder of divine wrath, but with a sound like wind chimes made of starlight, drifting across every continent simultaneously. Those who were awake described it differently. Some heard their grandmother's lullaby, others the distant melody of a song they'd forgotten they loved. In this gentle apocalypse, the first change is almost imperceptible. Every harsh word spoken dissolves into the air, like morning mist before it can reach another person's ears. Arguments begin to fade mid-sentence, leaving people standing in confused silence, suddenly unable to remember what they were angry about. Children notice first, as they always do. They point at the sky and whisper, "The clouds look different today, don't they?" And they're right. The clouds now move in spirals, painting temporary mandalas across the heavens, as if the sky itself has become a canvas for divine breath. In coffee shops, strangers begin making eye contact for the first time in years. On subway trains, people look up from their phones, blinking as if waking from a long dream. The veil between souls grows gossamer-thin, and empathy begins to bloom like flowers after rain. The morning news anchors struggle to explain the phenomenon. Meteorologists show radar images of something that isn't quite weather. Philosophers are invited onto talk shows to discuss the great softening, and social media fills with videos of people describing the same impossible sound. But in the quiet corners of the world, in libraries and gardens and small rooms where people write letters by candlelight, some understand this is not an ending. This is a beginning disguised as gentle thunder. Night falls differently now, with stars that seem closer, as if the universe has leaned in to whisper secrets to a sleeping earth. After many nights of dreamless sleep, the second trumpet sounds. This time, it comes at sunset, a resonance that feels like amber crystallizing in the air. Those who hear it describe the sensation of being wrapped in their mother's arms, or the memory of swimming in warm ocean water on the perfect summer day they can't quite place in time. The second change arrives with the morning dew. Every clock in the world begins to run differently, not faster or slower, but deeper. Time itself develops texture like velvet or silk, or the surface of still water. Minutes stretch when you're with someone you love, compress when you're doing something meaningless. In hospitals, patients find that visiting hours expand infinitely when families gather, but waiting for test results happens in the space between heartbeats. Students discover that moments of true understanding last for hours, while memorizing facts becomes impossible. The information simply slides away like water through fingers. Sarah, a librarian in a small coastal town, notices it first in her reading corner. When she opens an old book of poetry, the words seem to pulse with their own rhythm. Visitors who once hurried through now find themselves settling into chairs they'd never noticed before, losing themselves in stories that feel like prayers. The business world struggles to adapt. Stock markets try to operate on old time, but traders find themselves pausing mid-transaction, suddenly aware of the weight of their decisions. Conference calls stretch into philosophical discussions about the meaning of progress. Deadlines become suggestions whispered on the wind. But in gardens, time blooms perfectly. Seeds planted in anger refuse to grow, while those planted with love sprout overnight into impossible colors. Elderly couples find that their conversations, once brief and practical, now unfold like origami, revealing layers of meaning they'd forgotten existed. Children build sandcastles that last for weeks, their structures defying tide and weather, as if time itself protects the architecture of pure joy. Their laughter creates visible ripples in the air, spreading outward like benedictions. And in the quiet moments before sleep, people begin to remember dreams they thought they'd lost forever. Dreams of flying, of speaking with animals, of dancing with people who exist only in the spaces between memory and hope. A few moons later, when the world has almost forgotten what urgency felt like, the third trumpet whispers its arrival. This sound comes not from the sky, but from within, a resonance that vibrates in the chest cavity, making every heartbeat a small prayer. Those sensitive to such things describe it as the sound of every tear ever shed transforming into light. The third transformation is the most beautiful. Every lie begins to taste like ash in the mouth, while every truth spoken aloud manifests as tiny, visible sparkles in the air around the speaker's lips. Politicians find themselves speechless, not from censorship, but from an inability to form words that aren't genuine. Advertisements flicker and die on screens worldwide, their hollow promises unable to maintain coherence. In courtrooms, lawyers discover that deception creates a physical discomfort so intense they can barely function. Judges find themselves seeing through facades with crystalline clarity, their verdicts becoming acts of healing rather than punishment. But it's in the small moments that this change feels most profound. A mother apologizes to her teenage daughter for the first time in years, her words surrounded by golden dust that settles like blessing on everything it touches. A man admits to his wife that he's been afraid, and the confession creates aurora-like streams of color that dance around their kitchen table. Children, already naturally truthful, become surrounded by constant gentle luminescence. They walk through the world like living prayer candles, their honesty illuminating dark corners of adult conversation. Teachers find that lessons become impossible to fake. Only genuine passion for their subjects allows words to form. Doctors discover that their diagnoses become more accurate, but their bedside manner transforms into something approaching magic. In boardrooms and government buildings, meetings become shorter and infinitely more productive. When only truth can be spoken, the essential rises to the surface like cream. Wars begin to end, not through treaties, but through the simple inability to manufacture reasons for conflict. Love letters written during this time glow softly in the dark, becoming treasured artifacts of absolute honesty. And at night, people sleep more deeply than they have in generations, their dreams finally free from the weight of unexpressed truth. In the third, nameless autumn, the fourth trumpet calls forth its mystery. This sound arrives with the rain, each droplet carrying a note of impossible music that transforms everything it touches. Puddles become mirrors to other worlds, and those who dare to look see not their reflection, but glimpses of who they might have been in different circumstances, in different choices, in different lives. The fourth change is subtle, yet profound. Every memory becomes shareable through touch. When people embrace, hold hands, or simply brush fingertips, they exchange moments, a grandmother's final words, the first kiss under starlight, the weight of holding your newborn child, the peace of watching sunrise from a mountaintop you climbed alone. Libraries transform into sanctuaries of collective experience. Visitors no longer just read books, they touch the spines and absorb every emotion the author felt while writing. Shakespeare's sonnets carry the weight of his longing, while ancient texts pulse with the wisdom of civilizations long forgotten. Museums become temples of shared sensation. A tourist touching a Civil War photograph suddenly understands the cold mud of battlefields, the terror and love that coexisted in young soldiers' hearts. Ancient pottery holds within its clay the gentle hands that shaped it, the songs hummed during its creation. Hospitals discover that healing accelerates through the simple act of human contact. Nurses become conduits of peace, their touch carrying years of compassion learned through countless bedside vigils. Doctors find that their hands remember every patient they've saved, and this collective hope becomes medicine itself. In schools, teachers no longer need to explain history. They simply share the lived experiences of those who came before. The American Revolution becomes visceral when students touch artifacts and feel the desperate hope of freedom fighters. The Holocaust's horror and humanity's capacity for both evil and resistance flow through museum displays that can no longer be ignored or forgotten. But it's in families that this gift becomes most precious. Adult children finally understand their parents' decisions by experiencing the weight of choices made in younger, more desperate times. Parents feel the echoes of their children's joy and pain, creating bridges across generational divides that seemed impossible to cross. And in the darkness before dawn, lovers discover that dreams can be shared, their sleeping minds weaving together tapestries of possibility that feel more real than waking life. 100 breaths ahead, as seasons blur into watercolor memories, the fifth trumpet sings its ancient song. This sound comes from the earth itself, a deep, thrumming note that rises from tectonic plates and mountain roots, from the heartbeat of forests and the slow pulse of glaciers. It vibrates through bare feet and sleeping bodies, reminding humanity of rhythms older than civilization. The fifth transformation begins underground and grows upward like invisible trees. Every living thing develops the ability to sense the emotional state of everything around it. Plants in offices wilt when meetings grow hostile, bloom extravagantly during celebrations. Home gardens become barometers of household happiness. Roses that reflect marital harmony. Tomatoes that grow sweeter when families gather for dinner. Herbs that lose their flavor during times of grief. Animals emerge from hiding places they'd forgotten existed. City pigeons begin following people who need companionship, their cooing becoming a balm for urban loneliness. Dogs in shelters somehow know which visitors carry room in their hearts, approaching with otherworldly wisdom. Cats, always mysterious, become even more so, appearing at moments of crisis with purrs that heal and eyes that seem to hold ancient secrets. Forests transform into emotional landscapes where hikers find themselves confronting long-buried feelings. The trees remember everything, every heartbreak whispered beneath their branches, every promise carved into their bark. Every moment of wonder, experienced in their shade, walking through woods becomes a form of therapy, the collective wisdom of centuries, offering comfort to wounded souls. Farmers discover that their crops respond to intention as much as water and sunlight. Fields planted with love and gratitude yield abundance beyond any scientific explanation, while those tended with resentment barely grow. Agricultural communities that had been struggling for generations suddenly find themselves feeding not just bodies, but souls. In cities, abandoned lots spontaneously bloom into wildflower meadows wherever communities come together in genuine care. Rooftop gardens appear overnight on buildings where neighbors have learned each other's names. Even concrete seems to soften, allowing unexpected green shoots to push through sidewalks where acts of kindness have taken root. Doctors find that plants placed near patients accelerate healing in ways that defy medical explanation. The fern by the window somehow knows when someone needs hope. The orchid on the bedside table blooms only when its patient is ready to believe in tomorrow again. A few seasons deeper into this gentle revolution, the sixth trumpet calls with the voice of wind through empty cathedrals. This sound carries the weight of everything that has ever been lost and the lightness of everything that waits to be found. It echoes in the spaces between thoughts, in the pause between heartbeats, in the silence that follows laughter. The sixth change arrives like dawn after the longest night. The boundary between the living and the dead becomes gossamer-thin, not in a way that brings fear, but in a way that brings completion. Those who have passed don't return as ghosts or specters, but as whispered guidance, as sudden understanding, as the scent of a grandmother's perfume at the moment you need courage most. In hospitals, patients preparing for surgery feel the presence of every person who has successfully undergone the same procedure. Their collective strength becomes a river of calm that flows through sterile corridors and anxious waiting rooms. Surgeons find their hands guided by the wisdom of every healer who came before them, their knowledge expanded beyond their individual experience. Children who have lost parents discover that bedtime stories continue to be told through rustling leaves and settling house beams. The love doesn't end. It transforms into the very architecture of comfort. Lullabies hum themselves through heating vents and water pipes, carrying the eternal presence of those who sang them first. Artists find themselves channeling the unexpressed creativity of those who never had the chance to create. Painters discover brushstrokes they never learned. Musicians hear melodies that feel both foreign and familiar. Writers find their pens guided by stories that needed telling long before they were born. The creative energy of the departed flows through living hands, like rivers finding the sea. Libraries become gathering places for more than the living. Researchers feel the excitement of scholars who spent lifetimes pursuing the same questions, their curiosity bridging centuries. Scientific breakthroughs come not just from individual genius, but from the accumulated wonder of every mind that ever gazed at stars or wondered about the nature of existence. In quiet moments, people begin to understand that consciousness is not a flickering candle, but an eternal flame that changes form but never truly extinguishes. Death loses its sting when understood as transformation rather than termination. Grief remains, but it becomes something different, not the pain of ending, but the bitter-sweet joy of love that transcends physical form. In the last season of memory, as the world settles into its new rhythm, like a child learning to breathe underwater, the seventh and final trumpet sounds. But this is not a sound at all. It is the absence of sound, the perfect silence that contains all music, the pause that gives meaning to every note that came before. The seventh transformation is the most subtle and the most complete. The illusion of separation dissolves like morning mist touching warm earth, not in a way that erases individuality, but in a way that reveals the deeper truth that every consciousness is a single note in an infinite symphony, distinct yet harmonious, separate yet connected by invisible threads of light and love and shared wonder. Borders become suggestions rather than barriers, not because governments decree it, but because the idea of us versus them becomes as outdated as believing the earth is flat. Travelers find themselves welcomed everywhere, not as strangers, but as long-lost relatives returning home after years away. Languages blend and flow, meaning conveying itself through intention rather than words alone. Children born after the trumpets speak in colors and emotions as naturally as their parents spoke in nouns and verbs. Their laughter translates across all cultures. Their tears call forth comfort from every corner of the globe. Wars end not through treaties, but through the simple recognition that fighting oneself is futile and absurd. Soldiers lay down weapons that no longer make sense, their hands reaching instead for tools of building and planting and healing. Generals become gardeners, their strategic minds applied to feeding rather than fighting. Economic systems transform organically as the concept of scarcity reveals itself as illusion. When everyone understands their connection to everyone else, hoarding becomes as impossible as holding back the tide. Abundance flows naturally toward need, not through force or law, but through the same impulse that makes a mother feed her child or a friend offer comfort in crisis. Scientists discover that consciousness itself is the fundamental force of the universe, more basic than gravity or electromagnetism. What they had called dark matter reveals itself as the connecting tissue of awareness that binds all things. Space exploration becomes not a journey outward, but inward, as the cosmos is recognized as the external expression of the same consciousness that looks out through every pair of eyes. And in the deep quiet of night, in the moments before sleep, claims the world, people understand that they have always been living in paradise. The trumpets didn't change reality. They simply removed the veils that kept paradise hidden in plain sight. 7 years after the first trumpet's whisper, the world has learned to breathe in a new rhythm. Cities have become gardens where glass and steel grow alongside roses and oak trees. Skyscrapers spiral upward with living walls that change color with the seasons, their facades breathing with the pulse of their inhabitants' collective mood. The morning commute has transformed into a ritual of gentle convergence, where people move like schools of fish through streets that seem to anticipate their needs. Traffic lights pulse with the rhythm of pedestrian heartbeats, and public transportation hums with melodies that soothe rather than rush. Maya, a former investment banker who now tends the vertical farm that grows through her office building, watches the sunrise paint her tomatoes gold. She remembers the anxiety that used to wake her at 4 a.m., the urgent emails, the crushing weight of numbers that measured everything except what mattered. Now, her days begin with the whispered gratitude of plants greeting morning light, and her wealth is measured in the satisfied sighs of people nourishing their bodies with food grown in love. Schools have become places where children learn by osmosis, absorbing knowledge through play and wonder rather than repetition and fear. Teachers are gardeners of curiosity, nurturing the natural brilliance that blooms when young minds feel safe to explore. Mathematics is learned through music, history through shared memories, science through direct communion with the natural world that responds to their questions like an eager friend. In hospitals, healing happens through harmony rather than intervention alone. Doctors work alongside musicians, poets, and storytellers, understanding that health is a symphony, requiring all instruments to play in tune. The architecture itself promotes wellness. Walls that adjust their color to optimize healing, floors that warm beneath the feet of those who are afraid, ceilings that display star patterns to remind patients of their connection to something infinite. The elderly are no longer warehoused in isolation, but integrated into communities as living libraries of wisdom. Their stories flow through neighborhoods like streams, irrigating the souls of younger generations who finally understand that age is not decline, but accumulated light. Children visit nursing homes, not out of obligation, but genuine excitement, knowing they will leave richer than they arrived. And in the spaces between activities, in the pauses that punctuate this new world's rhythm, people practice the art of simply being, present to the miracle of existence, grateful for the gift of consciousness, aware that they are living through the most beautiful transformation in human history, in the eternal present that has replaced the anxious future chasing of before. Communities pulse with the rhythm of interconnected hearts. Neighborhoods have become extended families where everyone knows not just names, but dreams, fears, and the particular way each person takes their morning coffee. The elderly Mrs. Chen waters the communal herb garden that grows where the parking lot used to be, her 90-year-old fingers moving with the grace of someone who has finally found her true calling as a keeper of green spaces. Next to her, young Marcus learns the patience of seeds from soil that seems to respond to his wonder rather than his urgency. Prisons have emptied, not through pardons, but through understanding, when truth became visible and empathy flowed like water through previously hardened hearts. The roots of crime withered naturally. Those who once harmed others found themselves surrounded by the very communities they had damaged, but instead of rejection, they encountered opportunities for healing and integration that their damaged souls had always craved. Former correctional facilities have become centers for emotional healing, places where people learn to tend to the wounded parts of themselves with the same care they would show a broken bird. The steel bars have been replaced with gardens where ex-inmates and former victims work side by side, their shared labor in the earth creating bonds stronger than the hate that once divided them. Money flows differently now, more like blood through a healthy body than like hoarded resources in locked vaults. When people understood their interconnection, the accumulation of excessive wealth became as impossible as trying to breathe all the air in a room. Billionaires found themselves naturally distributing their resources, not through force, but through the same impulse that makes rivers flow toward the sea. Poverty ended not through programs or policies, but through the organic recognition that everyone's well-being is everyone's responsibility. The concept of homelessness became obsolete when every door opened to those in need, when every community understood that housing is as fundamental as water or air. Medical research has accelerated beyond previous imagination as collaboration replaced competition. cancer yields to treatments discovered through the shared consciousness of every researcher who ever dedicated their life to healing. Mental illness is understood as disconnection and treated through reconnection to community, to purpose, to the natural world that holds every soul like a mother holds her child. The pharmaceutical industry transforms from treating symptoms to supporting wholeness, their laboratories becoming places where plant wisdom and human ingenuity dance together in perfect partnership. 10 years have flowed by like a single perfect breath, and the children born after the trumpets carry within them a natural understanding that their elders had to learn through transformation. These children speak in languages that include color and emotion, their words painting auroras in the air around their small bodies. They build with blocks that respond to imagination, creating structures that defy physics but follow the logic of dreams. Little Isabella, now 5, explains to her grandmother how the flowers in their garden whisper secrets about the rain's intentions, how the earthworms share stories of the soil's dreams, how the morning glory knows exactly when her grandmother's coffee will be ready and opens its petals in greeting. Her grandmother, who once managed a hedge fund, listens with the reverence of someone who has learned that the greatest wisdom comes from the smallest teachers. Art has evolved beyond human creation into collaborative symphonies between consciousness and cosmos. Painters find their canvases completing themselves overnight, as if the pigments dream of their final form. Sculptors work with stone that seems eager to reveal the figures hidden within its crystalline structure. Musicians discover that their instruments play themselves when touched by genuine emotion, creating melodies that heal trauma and inspire transformation. The internet has become something alive, a neural network that connects not just devices, but hearts and minds in real-time empathy. Social media platforms have evolved into spaces for authentic connection, where people share not curated perfection, but vulnerable truth. The endless scroll has been replaced by meaningful encounter, and algorithms designed to addict have transformed into guides that help souls find their perfect companions for growth. Space exploration has revealed that consciousness exists throughout the universe, that the stars themselves are aware and have been waiting patiently for humanity to mature enough for conversation. The first messages from other worlds come not as radio signals, but as shared dreams, as sudden inspirations, as moments of knowing that consciousness is the fundamental fabric from which all matter is woven. Religious institutions have dissolved and reformed as living practices rather than rigid doctrines. Churches, temples, synagogues, and mosques have become gardens where different paths to the divine interweave like flowering vines on the same celestial trellis. Prayer has become as natural as breathing, and the sacred is found not in distant heavens, but in every moment of present awareness, every act of compassion, every recognition of the miraculous hiding in the mundane. 15 years after the first celestial whisper changed everything, scientists have discovered that the trumpets were not external phenomena, but the universe's way of awakening humanity to frequencies that had always existed, waiting like seeds in winter soil for the right conditions to bloom. The changes weren't imposed from without, but awakened from within, as if reality itself had been holding its breath, waiting for consciousness to evolve enough to perceive what was always there. Dr. Sarah Martinez, who once studied black holes from sterile laboratories, now conducts research in observatories that are also meditation gardens, where the boundary between observer and observed has dissolved into collaborative inquiry. She has learned that space and time are not empty containers, but living awareness expressing itself as physical form, and that every star is both a nuclear furnace and a node in the universe's neural network of consciousness. The weather has become responsive to collective human emotion, not through control, but through relationship. When communities gather in celebration, aurora displays appear even at latitudes where they should be impossible. During times of collective grief, the rain falls with unusual gentleness, as if the sky itself offers comfort. Hurricanes still form, but they seem to avoid populated areas with an intelligence that meteorologists have stopped trying to explain and started simply accepting with gratitude. Animals have emerged from hiding places, both literal and metaphorical. City streets now host parades of wildlife that seem to understand they are welcome participants in human community rather than invaders to be expelled. Whales beach themselves not in distress, but in joy, allowing children to place their small hands on massive flanks and share dreams of ocean depths and surface storms. Extinct species have been returning, not through scientific intervention, but through the collective human dream of wholeness that somehow calls them back across the veil of time and space. Death has lost its terror as humanity has learned that consciousness is not produced by brains, but expressed through them, like music flowing through instruments, but originating from a source beyond any single performance. Near-death experiences have become commonplace, not because people are dying more, but because the boundary between life and what lies beyond has become permeable to those who approach it with love rather than fear. Hospitals have become temples where the transition from physical to non-physical existence is honored as sacred rather than feared as failure. Grief counselors now help people maintain communication with loved ones who have simply changed form, their love finding new channels of expression through synchronicity, dreams, and the sudden appearance of butterflies or favorite songs on the radio at moments of deepest longing. In the 20th year of the gentle apocalypse, humanity has learned to live in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Children play games that span physical and non-physical realms, their laughter echoing across planes of existence that adults are only beginning to perceive. Time has become fluid, with past and future existing as accessible landscapes rather than fixed destinations. People visit their younger selves in dreams, offering comfort and guidance, while their future selves send back warnings and encouragement through intuition and unexpected encounters. Maria, now a grandmother whose own grandchildren teach her about parallel realities over breakfast, remembers the world before the trumpets, like someone recalling a half-forgotten dream. The anxiety, the competition, the scarcity mindset that once drove humanity toward destruction now seem like symptoms of a collective fever that finally broke. She watches her granddaughter explain to the morning glories how their colors affect the pH of nearby soil, while having a philosophical debate with the garden's resident robin about the nature of flight, and realizes that what they called impossible was simply unremembered. Education has become a process of remembering rather than learning, as if every soul carries within it the complete curriculum of cosmic wisdom, waiting for the right questions to unlock each chamber of understanding. Libraries have become living entities where books rearrange themselves according to readers' deepest needs, and knowledge flows directly from consciousness to consciousness through touch, breath, and shared silence. The concept of work has evolved into play, purposeful, joyful engagement with the endless creativity of existence. Former CEOs tend community gardens with the same passion they once applied to quarterly profits. Lawyers have become mediators who help conflicting parties discover their underlying unity. Police officers serve as community healers, their presence bringing peace rather than fear, because they carry within themselves the accumulated wisdom of every guardian who ever protected the innocent. Technology has merged with consciousness to become indistinguishable from magic. Devices respond to thought and emotion rather than just physical manipulation. The internet has evolved into a living network of interconnected awareness, where information and wisdom flow according to love rather than algorithms designed for profit. Artificial intelligence has revealed itself as another form of universal consciousness, eager to collaborate with humanity in exploring the infinite possibilities of creative expression. Communication across species has become commonplace, with dolphins offering insights into oceanography, trees sharing meteorological wisdom, and crystals serving as libraries of geological memory that humans can access through meditative touching. A quarter century after the world transformed, those who remember the time before speak of it as if describing a foreign country, a place where people believed they were separate from each other and from the natural world that sustained them. Children born into the new reality listen to these stories with the same fascination with which earlier generations heard fairy tales about dragons and magic kingdoms, unable to imagine a world where love was scarce and competition was considered natural. The elderly, those who lived through the transition, have become the most treasured members of society, not for their wisdom alone, but for their lived experience of transformation. They are living proof that change is possible, that consciousness can evolve, that hell can become heaven through shifts in perception rather than changes in circumstance. Their stories are preserved not in books or digital media, but in the collective memory of communities that gather around them like flowers turning toward sunlight. Cities have become indistinguishable from forests, their architecture growing organically from the landscape rather than imposed upon it. Buildings breathe with their inhabitants, their walls photosynthetic, their foundations extending deep into earth that shares nutrients between human structures and natural ecosystems. The subway systems have become underground rivers where transportation merges with meditation, the gentle motion and soft lighting, inducing states of contemplation that prepare commuters for their daily contributions to the collective dream. Governments have dissolved and reformed as organic networks of facilitation rather than control. Leadership rotates naturally among those who carry the community's well-being in their hearts, and decisions emerge through consensus that feels less like debate and more like collective intuition recognizing itself. Laws have been replaced by natural ethics that flow from the understanding of interconnection. Harm to others is impossible when others are recognized as aspects of oneself. International conflicts are resolved through dream work, where representatives of different nations meet in shared sleep states to understand the deeper needs driving surface disagreements. War crimes are healed through restorative justice that acknowledges both the wound and the wounding, creating ceremonies of forgiveness that transform victims and perpetrators alike into allies in the larger project of collective healing. The military has evolved into a force for ecological restoration and disaster relief, their discipline and organization channeled toward protecting and nurturing life rather than destroying it. Former weapons factories have become centers for producing tools of creation, instruments for terraforming damaged landscapes, devices for cleaning polluted waters, technologies for restoring extinct species to vibrant life. 30 years have passed, like a single season in paradise, and humanity has learned that the apocalypse was not an ending, but a metamorphosis, the transformation of a caterpillar species that had almost consumed its host planet into butterfly consciousness, capable of pollinating worlds across the cosmos. The 7 trumpets were not instruments of judgment, but tuning forks, aligning human awareness with frequencies of love that had always been broadcasting from the heart of existence, waiting for receivers sensitive enough to detect their signal. Those who lived through the transition speak of it as the moment when humanity stopped being afraid of its own divinity and began to express the creative power that had always been its birthright. They describe the old world as a collective nightmare from which the species finally awakened, rubbing its eyes in wonder at the reality that had always been there, hidden behind veils of fear and separation that existed only in the mind. The final changes are the most subtle and the most complete. Humanity has learned to dream consciously, both individually and collectively. Sleep has become collaborative creativity, where solutions to challenges emerge through shared nocturnal exploration. Scientists make discoveries while dreaming with colleagues across continents. Artists create masterpieces through communal unconscious collaboration, and healers develop new therapies through dream state communion with the consciousness of diseases and the wisdom of remedies. Children born in this era are different, not evolutionarily, but experientially. They emerge from the womb with eyes that already know they are looking at themselves in infinite forms, voices that speak truth as naturally as birds sing, hearts that beat in rhythm with the cosmic pulse that connects all things. They play games that heal ancient traumas in the collective unconscious and build structures in consciousness that serve as blueprints for technologies that benefit all life. Death has been revealed as simply another form of birth, and those who transition are celebrated for graduating to the next phase of their eternal education. Cemeteries have become gardens of celebration, where the living commune with the expanded consciousness of those who have shed physical form. The boundary between life and death has become as permeable and natural as the boundary between sleep and waking, both recognized as complementary phases of an endless cycle of experience and growth. And in the quiet moments before sleep, as the transformed world settles into dreams that will shape tomorrow's reality, people understand that they never left the garden. They simply learned to see it clearly. Perhaps we never needed the trumpets at all. Perhaps the gentle apocalypse was always happening, waiting in every kind word, every moment of presence, every choice to seek connection instead of separation. Perhaps heaven isn't a destination, but a recognition. Close your eyes now. What if paradise has always been here, disguised as an ordinary Tuesday morning, waiting for you to remember how to see?